trust, credibility, authority, that's the currency that media outlets in the trade space, they trade on.
I think the biggest challenge that B2B marketers have at the moment is proving that ROI.
Gone are days of trade magazine teams being 6, 12 people strong. It's 1 or 2 now, isn't it?
That's it. I feel quite strongly that in the current climate, this sort of trust debate and the trust challenge that we face, it's probably in a sense increased the value that we place on the trade media.
People need this information as part of their professional lives.
Those titles we consider to be kind of top tier. They're the ones that amplify their content across social channels. They're the ones that make their content easy to find and easy to stop us in our tracks when we're sat on the sofa watching the football of an evening. You know, we'll still read, we'll still consume work-based content in those times as well.
Welcome to What's Got the World Talking, the podcast that delves into what's in the minds of the marketing, PR and social media world. In this episode, we're taking a deep dive into part of the media ecosystem that doesn't always get the spotlight it deserves, trade media. As newsrooms consolidate, audiences fragment, and AI reshapes how information is discovered and trusted, how is trade journalism evolving? What do journalists need from brands when resources are stretched and expectations are higher? And why does influence within trade titles matter more than ever for credibility, reputation, and long-term growth? I'm joined by B2B Director Tom Leatherbarrow and Associate Director Rob Jones to discuss how trade media is changing, what makes a compelling story for specialist audiences today, and how to combat the "you would say that, wouldn't you" response. Here's what brands should understand if they want to build authority, shape industry narratives, and be taken seriously by the people who matter most. So welcome. Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Rob Jones, Associate Director at WPR.
And I'm Tom Leatherbarrow. I'm a Director at WPR.
And you both work very much in our B2B team.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we are here today to talk all things trade media. I'm sure 99.9% of people know what trade media is, but do you want to start by just explaining what the term means, what that includes?
I suppose for us, really, the term trade media, it's the media that we consume in our professional lives rather than our personal lives. So that could be, magazines, that could be online publications. It's a media vehicle that serves us in that professional environment.
I think that's very beautifully put. Can you expand on that, Tom?
Or I have nothing else to say to that. That was very good.
Hopefully that won't be the theme of the podcast. We'll hear from you a little bit. I suppose a question that we were asked recently, which is one of the reasons for kind of recording this podcast today, is do people still read the trade media? We were asked that in a meeting, weren't we?
Yes. Yeah. My answer would be is that we are consuming media in a different way. The example I always use is I don't read PR Week in terms of going on to or picking up a physical magazine. But I am alerted to stories in PR Week or podcasts that PR Week are doing, and I consume those. So I think they are the trade media is relevant, but it has changed significantly over the last 10, 15 years.
As has all media, really. It's no different to consumer media. It's had to diversify as the way we consume our news changes.
Absolutely. I think as well, it's quite a broad term, isn't it? The trade media. I think we see across our client base, we're targeting people who are desk-based. We're targeting people who are van-based. They might be in the trades and, they don't do their sort of day-to-day duties from behind a desk. So I think when we look at the trade media and do people still read it, I think the answer is yes, but potentially not as a printed hard copy magazine that comes through the letterbox sort of once a month.
I suppose the question, if I could rewind time, you better phrase it, do people still consume it? Yes, it might not necessarily be reading it in the sense we used to.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's
it.
I think
still consumed.
The consumption patterns, as we understand it as well, happen quite differently. So you might find that people are picking up, Tom alluded to this a second ago, individual stories from a trade publication without necessarily kind of consuming that publication in its entirety.
Yeah, completely. So I think you use PR Week as an example. I might not log on to PR Week's website every day, but if I see something on LinkedIn, I think, that sounds bit of juicy gossip or a really interesting piece of insight, I will click on that link on LinkedIn and go and have a read.
Exactly that.
So I think we're probably started to cover this already, but let's set the scene. What are the biggest structural changes you've seen in trade media over recent years?
For me, it's the divergence. I think there are some publications that have become very digitized, have embraced new media channels. There are others that haven't perhaps gone on that journey, and it's created a real. There are tier one publications, and there are tier two and three. The best publications are finding new ways to reach an audience.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think structurally, I mean, the landscape as a whole has changed. We've seen, titles have fallen by the wayside, unfortunately. Ultimately, we're dealing with, like with all of publishing, we're working in a commercial environment. And I think we've seen a number of titles fall by the wayside, others that have consolidated. So they might have been print before, now they're digital only. But I think that competitive environment has really made media outlets kind of consider what they need to do to land with their intended readership, their intended audience. I think that's been for the good of the sectors that we work in.
I suppose it's been survival of the fittest, really, hasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously, there's an ad revenue kind of game at play here. All of these titles are ultimately, they are commercial organisations. They can only run successfully if they're backed by advertisers. And obviously, we work with brands who advertise as well as look to generate media coverage, editorial, and so on. I think those that are really thriving are able to demonstrate that return to the brands that they serve. It could be, they've got really effective channels for driving traffic to website. It could be that they have databases we can tap into, segments of those databases for, particular stories or particular product announcements or whatever. So yeah, absolutely, survival of the fittest is certainly what we've seen over the last few years.
And can you name some trade titles that you think are thriving or have adopted this new model particularly well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm ever since day one of working at WPR, I've always worked in the sort
that was
of
quite
HVAC.
a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, we won't say exactly how many years, but no. I've always worked with brands in the sort of heating and plumbing industry, and I think the work that Installer has done in that space has been really, really strong. I think they were the first to sort of forgo their print edition, their print title, and went completely digital. And we've seen, the content that they publish across numerous channels, social, their website, the volume of traffic they get to that website has been really strong as a result of that. And now we're starting to see others sort of follow that route to market. I think it's an acknowledgement of the industry and that readership as well. I mentioned it before, but ultimately their readership's heating and heating engineers, plumbers. Are they sat behind a desk? Do they consume print? Probably not quite in the same way we see other sector professionals do it. So yeah, I think a lot of admiration for them being the first to sort of really commit to that digital first mechanism.
And Tom, do you have any favourites or inspiration to share?
Of the sectors we work in, I would highlight the likes of Utility Week, which is very much aimed at sort of C-suite, which is one of the sort of the key audiences we want to hit. I would point to publications like the Manufacturer as well.
Yeah, all strong names. I remember from when I first started out in PR and worked in B2B much more. So we understand now that trade media has changed, the way content is consumed is being changed. Has that had any impact on the type of stories journalists are more or less likely to cover and the kind of stories they're looking for brands to provide or work with them on?
I think we're in a situation now where they are looking for experts. They're looking for people who can add value to their publication, for people who can solve the problems that their readership are encountering, be that in the manufacturing sector or pharmaceuticals or whatever sector you're in. It's up to the PRs, I think, to find those stories. The days of the journalistic researcher has gone. We are now the journalist researcher. We have to go out, find the story, insert the key messages from a client into that story, and then sell it into the journalist or editor.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the big difference between how we consume media in our sort of personal lives and professional, I think often we talk about you are looking to overcome a particular challenge within your professional life, and being able to kind of pair our clients up with those challenges and offer something that's proprietary, unique. That could be an opinion, that could be the promotion of a particular tool that helps people to overcome a particular issue or challenge. I think it's our job to ask our clients the right questions. I think be plugged into these issues that are taking place across the sectors we operate in, and understanding which questions can we ask our client to eke out those insights, that advice, that expertise that can then really benefit the journalist and in turn the readership of that media as well.
And what makes Dream Client when it comes to delivering great coverage across the trade media? What can a client do to accelerate those levels of coverage?
Have an opinion, I think, is a big one.
Yeah.
Not an opinion for an opinion's sake, but I think an opinion based on true insight, proximity to their customer base, a real understanding of what it is that makes their customer tick. I think that honesty and transparency with us as well. Ultimately we're here in a way to act as a filter, to be able to say, right, okay, you have that insight, you're speaking to customers about this topic. This is what we think we can eke out of that discussion, that debate, that dialogue, to really make the coverage sing and the coverage land in the right way that reflects well on the brand as well.
And Tom?
I think what Rob said is it's being brave enough to have an opinion, and to be willing to share that opinion and to put themselves out there as an expert. The really good PR solves a problem, and you have to identify the problem, use the expert to provide the solution, and put the key messages that the client wants in there into the argument, but not lead with those messages.
It's interesting that you said the client needs to be brave and have an opinion. Do you always have to be brave to have an opinion, or can marketers sit? Is there a middle ground?
I think there are degrees of bravery. I don't think we're asking anybody to die on a hill, but to just have an opinion that provides insight and expertise.
Sounds perfect. And how has the relationship between trade journalists and PRs and marketing teams changed over the years, if indeed it has changed?
I think the relationship has become more of a symbiotic relationship. We need each other. The editorial teams have become smaller, but they've still got not only if it's still a print magazine to fill, they've now got a website to fill. They need somebody in the form of PR people who can help them identify a story, write a story, understand the markets that their readership is operating in. So it's become a relationship which is, I would say, closer.
I think just to add to that, I think there is risk that has been brought about with kind of innovation, probably within our sector actually, in terms of the tools that are available to distribute content to media contacts, for instance. I think there's a danger that if we rely too much on those tools, that importance of relationships, the kind of media, the relations part of media relations does get eroded away. So certainly when we're speaking to our clients, we're very keen to make sure that we invest time speaking to key media contacts in particular. And also I think the hallmark of a good relationship is when we get journalists coming to us and asking us questions or asking us for contributions to content they might be working on. That's almost the holy grail when we're working with media in certain sectors. So I think having that two-way relationship, like Tom says, is really important. I think we need to make sure that journalists see us as an expert in the sector, an expert in our client's business, and someone that they can bounce ideas off just as much as we can do that the other way around as well.
So as PRs, we are often the intermediary between the journalist and the client. But our client, the marketing teams, are often the intermediary between us and their wider business. And we'll come to them an opportunity. They've got to go and find a spokesperson. What advice would you give to marketing teams who need to find the right spokespeople to represent their company in trade titles?
There is a sweet spot between where the editor is, between where the client is and between where the market is. And right in the middle is the sweet spot that we have to try and hit.
Yeah, I think it's all about finding that person within the business that has that real intimate understanding of the customer challenges, the customer opportunities. Ultimately, that's the target audience. That's who we're trying to engage through the media. So that sort of understanding of the market and the people within that market is absolutely key.
I know this is a really broad question. It will vary enormously from title to title, but what generally makes a standout news story for trade press?
I often think the standout news stories are those that are based on something proprietary that we can offer, or the brand can offer that no other business can. We've certainly seen success with stories going into various sectors based around things like spikes in sales of a particular product category based around changes to legislation, for example. We've seen even things like Google search data, keyword insights and the like. We've been able to use that to generate stories. And I think the key is that data helps to educate the media on a prevailing issue or a prevailing area of interest that they can then see scope for a news story to spin off the back of. Obviously, we've touched on this already, I think, but opinion. I think it's not just about that data, that insight. It's about offering a view. How can this particular audience take this insight forward and apply it to their day-to-day duties in the professional environment that they operate in?
All very true. There can be a perception, I'm sure wrongly so, that trade media can be quite dry, quite evidence-based. Is there room for creativity or human interest stories in the trade press as we know it?
Very much so. I think the need for creativity in B2B is growing. I think the human interest side, I think the analogy I always use is that we work for one of the major machine tool manufacturers, and their audience is not only concerned with how fast a machine is or how much more productive it can be. They want the insight into what the subcontract manufacturer is doing just down the road. They want to know about what their competitors are doing. That's where bringing out the human element really can make PR work.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think, again, a sector that we know very, very well, that sort of heating and plumbing industry, we're engaging with people who are very much sole traders a lot of the time. So when we're thinking about content that's going to resonate with them, sometimes it's about how can we stop them within their time away from the job, actually? How can a brand have conversation with them, capture their attention, ideally offer them something useful that kind of appeals to their personal motivations as well as their professional ones. So that, it could be something as simple as a product that helps to speed up installation time so that they get to spend more time at home with the family, for example. So I think there is absolutely scope for those human interest, human motivated stories to really come through.
And I don't want to use the word readership figures because that doesn't really apply anymore, because as we know, people consume trade news rather than read trade news. But what's the kind of reach of these titles now? Obviously, it's going to be fewer than with consumer titles because your audience is niche, but are you talking still reaching into the tens, hundreds of thousands?
I think varies quite significantly. I'd say generally we're sort of in the tens of thousands now, but there are titles out there that are single figure thousands. And what I'd say to brands who might see some of those figures and say, well, okay, that looks small. Is it, is that worth our time? Is that worth our effort? I think ultimately it's all relative to the space that you occupy. We've got a few clients now in the sort of pitch care industry. There are only so many professional grounds people in the country, but that's not to take away the importance of, there are certain titles out there. One in particular springs to mind, a title called Pitch Care. It's highly regarded within that market and within that readership, that audience. So yes, I would say we need to look beyond the numbers and we need to look at how much sort of credibility, trust, I think is a big one, how much trust that media outlet carries with the audience we're looking to engage.
And that's true in terms of how we tier the media. We're not just doing it in terms of website hits. a publication gets. We're doing it in terms of domain authority. We're looking at how actively they promote their own stories, because we want the tweets that goes out, or the Facebook post or the LinkedIn post that goes out and is actively promoting a story. So there are multiple different ways that we're evaluating media and evaluating where we put our effort.
I think one of the really interesting areas for us that we're starting to look into now more and more is the impact of AI search. And
I was about to come on to that, so you beat me to it. We couldn't do a podcast
an inevitable,
without mentioning AI, so
an inevitable talking point. But I think what I find really interesting is we're actually seeing some of the more niche specialist titles that slightly contradicts a point that Tom's just made. Actually, they might not have the greatest domain authority, but actually they are being cited within the answers that are appearing in sort of LLMs, generative.
Because they're obviously a highly credible source and a very niche subject area.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. So we've, like Tom says, we've got numerous factors we'll consider when we think about which media outlets we should engage and we should try to reach an audience through. But yeah, ultimately it's often always relative to the sector and relative to the subject matter as well. Yeah.
And to what extent do our clients, or should a brand, invest in research? They've got, you say proprietary, but you've got unique data that you can take to trade titles. Is that still an important factor in driving coverage?
100%. I'll bring the AI topic up again. I think at this point, we know, speaking to journalists, they've always been receiving, hundreds of emails a day from PR people trying to get them to consider stories. And I think increasingly now, given the introduction of AI tools, there's a growing skepticism, I think, from our media contacts around, well, is that from a genuine human being? Is that real insight? And I think if we've got proprietary data, it's one of those sort of, holy grail trust signals to the media and to the readers of that media and to the AI algorithms that this is genuine insight, genuinely reflective of the humans that operate within a certain industry.
So sticking to the subject of AI, because you brought it up, what's the general rule we have here, or the tip you give to brands about using AI when pitching and preparing stories for trade titles?
I think we've got to use AI responsibly and carefully, and never at the expense of the layer of human sort of intellect that we apply to the work that we do. I think we mentioned earlier about that importance of asking the right questions of clients and understanding what makes them tick at times. And I think there are some things that AI will really struggle to replicate. Yes, it can string sentences together, but I think the concern that I have, particularly within the B2B media, is we are often looking at positioning the clients we work with as experts, as thought leaders. You can only lead if you have something unique to bring to the table. And I think by its very nature, if we outsource content delivery, research even at times to AI, that there's a danger that sort of owned insight, that expertise, that unique perspective on a particular issue, it quickly gets eroded away. And I think at that point, we lose our trust in the eyes of the media, and potentially the media lose their trust in the eyes of their readership, their audience as well. So AI can be a force for good. And I think there are ways that we're looking at using AI. And I know journalists actually are looking at using AI for things like optimizing headlines for stories, for instance. But I would say it can assist, but it should never replace that human layer that we as PR people kind of bring to the party, and the value that we aim to offer, but also the value that a journalist will aim to offer their audience as well.
The only thing I would add to that in terms of AI is that in B2B, we're often dealing with highly complex subject areas. For example, 5-axis machining or thermally activated building solutions. And we're dealing with individuals who've got 20, 30, 35 years experience of dealing with these extremely complex issues. And I've seen no evidence so far in the development of AI that it is capable of replicating that human intelligence, that ability to offer the sort of advice which many of the trade publication media or audiences are looking for.
Absolutely. I think the other thing is that a lot of the subject areas our clients sort of are invested in, they're so specialist and so kind of, sometimes we're dealing with them as they emerge, and there's no information out there on that given topic. Correct. So you could never defer that layer of responsibility to AI. I think it's that human layer, that human insight, opinion, expertise is irreplaceable in that respect, for sure.
Certainly when we've done a few previous podcasts looking at the use of AI in consumer media, the feedback I've been getting is if a journalist suspects your release or your pitch is written by AI, it's binned. Is that the same as with trade media as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think trust, credibility, authority, that's the currency that media outlets in the trade space, they trade on in much the same way that the consumer-oriented media does as well. And I think any risk that trust gets breached through content that might be AI generated, might be fabricated in some way, I think there's too much risk associated with that for both parties that it's worth taking.
Yeah. So we've discussed a lot about AI and the volume numbers that people are reaching, brands are reaching when using trade media. How do you measure the success of a trade media or a wider B2B campaign?
I think often we are looking at measurements well beyond the coverage itself. Typically we'll be working across multiple channels from the majority of our clients, I would say. So yes, we'll be running a PR campaign in terms of looking to generate media coverage and engagement, reach and awareness through the press, but we'll also be looking at how we can disseminate that message across other channels too. And I think ultimately we're looking to drive commercial impact for our clients. So ideally we want inquiries, we want the phones to ring, we want the email inquiries to come in. And it's on us, I suppose, to look at the channels most likely to deliver that. Which is where we look at things like UTM link tracking from different campaign sources, where referral traffic's coming from. I think one of the misconceptions we see at times is the assumption that because a story contains a link, it will drive floods of traffic to a client's website. Yeah, exactly. It's very, very rare. But again, it is a sign of authority. So I think, really, we're looking to drive that correlation between coverage and commercial impact as well. So we'll work very closely with our clients on closely tracking things like website traffic, interest in certain product categories, branded search. So has the work that we've done prompted an increase in searches for a particular product or for their brand? But ultimately, as I've said before, that holy grail, really, we're looking to drive sales if and where possible.
And how are we tracking the impact of all of this trade coverage on AI search results?
So it's a rapidly developing area at the moment. And I think we're trying to stay very, very close to this as algorithms change, as the tools that we have access to sort of improve their capabilities as well. What I would say is we are now increasingly tracking mentions and citations within AI search and looking at where that coverage that we land can really impact the answers that the LLMs are serving B2B audiences for any given brand.
And are we noticing there's a distinct difference or way that people use AI search in their business-to-business lives rather than consumer? So, like, for example, is Copilot outperforming ChatGPT for B2B search phrases?
We're still finding it's quite varied. I think the difference in usage patterns. I think one of the things that we'll always do as an initial benchmarking exercise is we'll work with the client, the brand, and we'll take an initial snapshot of which models are being cited most frequently within their space. It's quite often, it can be quite difficult to track. There are numerous models now out there. It can be quite difficult to track and sort of impact all of them to the same extent at the same time. I would say typically, I think we're finding, Copilot obviously is powered by ChatGPT. So ChatGPT tends to rule the roost in the majority of cases, but there's not much of a difference in terms of volume and interest, what we're seeing at the moment, at least, between ChatGPT and kind of Google's AI capabilities as well.
And is Claude featuring?
Yes, to some extent. I think less so than ChatGPT and Google. But again,
It could all change
it could all
tomorrow.
change very, very quickly. And we're seeing, we're starting to see, I think, within our professional lives generally, each AI tool, each AI LLM is being used for slightly different things, and they're almost starting to carve out a place in the market where they're wanting to own a certain space. I think, Claude, for instance, data and analytics. I know there's a lot of talk at the moment about how powerful a tool it is in that space, but perhaps less so from a kind of insight and expertise type.
Oh, interesting. I always think of it as more lengthier replies, but I don't.
Yeah, possibly.
Maybe that's just, you've just described it better than I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose I always think that when I'm at work, I don't know, I use Copilot. When I'm at home, I use ChatGPT, but I couldn't really tell you why.
Yeah, well, I think this comes back to kind of, we're creatures of habit, aren't we? And again, if we're looking at professional people who are desk-based, whether they're a Google business or a Microsoft business might have a massive bearing on whether they're using, Google's product, Gemini, for instance, or whether they're deferring to Copilot quite frequently. So that can have a massive bearing on it as well.
And something our consumer clients are finding is that a negative piece of coverage could actually come back to haunt them quite a long time afterwards from reports in the national media. Can the same be said of B2B coverage as well?
I think all brands are at risk of that very that very issue from occurring. I think perhaps, without being very, very stereotypical here, I think perhaps the consumer facing brands and the prevalence of kind of review sites and that, that portion of the industry, I think can have presents a bit more risk than maybe we see with some of our more technical high end B2B clients, where, you don't tend to see TripAdvisor reviews or, Trustpilot reviews for things like machine tools, for instance. But every brand's at risk. I think one of the things that we are keen to point out to our clients is that corroboration of authority, information, expertise across multiple channels and across multiple sources is really, really important. I think that's what we're seeing more and more. The AI algorithms are recognizing is that consistent message being deployed across multiple channels is really key. So I think in reality, I'd hope that those brands that invest in that space and really commit to that consistency of message across multiple channels will be less likely to be at risk of that kind of, historic negative coverage coming back to bite them.
So we've talked an awful lot about trade media, both standalone and its role in geo AI search. How can trade media integrate with broader B2B marketing campaigns that include owned and paid media, etc. as well?
That's quite central to what we do. I mean, that's where, for me, the trade media and the whole content marketing tactic really comes to the fore. Some of the best work I think we've done is when we've taken, you mentioned research before, is taken research, produced an industry report. Yes, there's PR that comes off the back of that, but there's also paid media to drive downloads, to drive sales leads. There's social media that can come up that comes off that as well. Website landing pages, all of that comes together in a content marketing campaign.
I think where our sort of earned media coverage can really enhance a campaign is building that credibility and building that trust again. I think I'm always very mindful of the "you would say that, wouldn't you?" response if we're only communicating to an audience from the brand's own channels. Give you an example. We work with a sports pitches specialist who are very, very big at kind of elite level hybrid pitches, basically. And we could go out into the market and say hybrid pitches are the best thing since sliced bread. The response to that would naturally be, well,
you'd say that,
funny
wouldn't
that
you?
you sell them and you've got product to sell here. But I think where trade coverage in that earned media really comes into play is we can use other voices. We can use voices of customers. We can use case studies. We can use that type of trust signal, again, to use that phrase, to really enhance the overall campaign and to earn earned coverage carries almost an extra layer of weight, I think, with a target audience. It shows that this has been through an editor. They've really scrutinized the quality of that content, the credibility of it. Does it stand up? Is it going to resonate with a given audience? And the impact that comes off the back of that isn't necessarily greater than the results that we can achieve from owned content as well. But I think that fusion of the two together can be a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it doesn't matter whether it's B2B or B2C, it's the same.
Yeah, definitely.
So curveball of a question, this hasn't really got very much to do with trade media at all, but what are the biggest challenges that are facing B2B marketers at the moment?
I think the biggest challenge that B2B marketers have at the moment is proving that ROI, proving that the money that they've spent, be it on PR, on paid media, whatever it is genuinely producing a return for the business.
Yeah, I think when we look at the B2B environment, I think there's always been an expectation, I've always felt, within internal kind of a commercial function that marketing should and can have a much more direct impact on sales. That happens in the consumer world as well, but that emphasis on brand and the kind of long-term brand building exercise, I think historically hasn't always been given as much emphasis maybe in the B2B space. It is very, very important. I think that's a conversation that we're having with clients all the time is, brands don't achieve success overnight, but equally we're in quite a challenging socio-economic climate at the moment, and
to put it mildly.
And and naturally businesses, B2B organizations, much like B2C organizations, are having budgets scrutinized. So we need to make sure we do everything we can to demonstrate that tangibility of impact, I think, which I like to think is something that we're particularly strong at in terms of our reporting metrics, and that point that we discussed earlier on about drawing links between the work that we do and the impact on demand, I think has become increasingly important and certainly won't go away anytime soon.
Yeah. And a final question from me. What's the trade media going to look like by 2030, 2035 and beyond? Will it all be written by AI?
I'd like to think not.
No,
let's hope it's not going to be completely outsourced to AI. I think we're likely to see we'll see channels diversify. We often find that the B2B media landscape kind of follows the B2C landscape in many ways. And I think the video first platforms, I think I'd expect those to become more prevalent. I think channels like podcasting, I think will become more prevalent as well. I think we've also got to be mindful though at the same time that a lot of our media outlets that we engage with, they're quite resource light. So I think there's a reason why we're not seeing podcasts left, right and centre from the media outlets that we deal with.
Gone are days of trade teams or trade magazine teams being 6, 12 people strong. It's 1 or 2 now, isn't it?
That's it. So if you're a single point of contact, an editor that's running a magazine, sometimes 2, and the website that goes with that, how many channels can you realistically take on? But I think we'll see attention spans are dwindling, aren't they? So I think we'll start to see snackable content become more prevalent. I think video content, absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you got anything to add?
All of that, I think the numbers of trade magazines will drop. We will get to a point where individual sectors have 1 or 2 very, very good magazines, and the rest just won't be financially viable.
So you feel confident about the future of trade titles and trade magazine?
It's been written off far too early. The landscape is changing, but there will be winners and losers on the back of really what Rob said before. People need this information as part of their professional lives. They have to go somewhere to get it. It's PR's job to provide the magazines with the stories that speak to their audiences.
I think it's really important that we have a thriving sort of trade media landscape, purely because of the challenges we face at the moment with trustworthiness of news, trustworthiness of content, be that led by individuals, be that led by brands. So I think, I would like to think that the trade press, the trade media will be here for a long, long time to come. And actually, I feel quite strongly that in the current climate, it's this sort of trust debate and the trust challenge that we face, it's probably, in a sense, increased the value that we place on the trade media. We need to place on the trade media as well, and the work that we do, working closely with our clients as well.
I'm conscious of what you said earlier about, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But would you tell marketers to keep on investing in trade media relations?
I would tell marketers to keep on investing in trade media relations.
You would say that though, wouldn't you?
I would say that, absolutely. But no, I think, all the points that we've mentioned over the course of this discussion, I think there is, in our professional lives, we all find information through different channels at different times. Even now, I think we've got to think about people as being people with work lives and home lives, but the two have become increasingly blended as well. So I think Tom made a really good point earlier around the media and the way that those titles we consider to be kind of top tier, they're the ones that amplify their content across social channels. They're the ones that make their content easy to find and easy to stop us in our tracks when we're sat on the sofa watching the football of an evening. We'll still read, we'll still consume work-based content in those times as well. So I think, absolutely, keep investing, and keep kind of gathering those insights and making sure that you're invested in that proprietary data, opinion, insight that really kind of demonstrates you can offer something different within the market to the competition.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you both so much for your time. I've learned a huge amount, and I'm off to go and read my trade media now.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.